On behalf of all of us at the ACLU, thank you so very much for joining us today and for supporting the ACLU of Southern California as it stands for justice. We extend our immense gratitude to Roseanne Newman, who is underwriting the luncheon in honor of our lifetime advocate for justice honoree, Sidney Mochtinger. Thus, all funds raised today will go directly to support the work.
Hi everyone, I'm Connie Chang. Please join me in thanking Voices of the City who performed as we arrived today and whom we will hear later in the program. Thank you also to the waitstaff and Hotel and Restaurant Employees Union Local 11. And we're so grateful for the efforts of our luncheon co-chairs, board members Stacy Horth-Newbert and Nichelle Carr, and our event committee members. Finally, thank you to our ACLU staff coordinating this event, and a special thank you to Christian Labano.
This year, we are 95 years old. What began with Upton Sinclair reading aloud the First Amendment in support of workers' rights to free speech and assembly on Liberty Hill on May 15, 1923, has expanded greatly to confront all kinds of injustice. Racial justice, police brutality, immigrants' rights, privacy, free speech, gender inequity, attacks on reproductive and LGBT rights, homelessness, and educational inequity. These challenges keep our legal staff and cooperating attorneys as busy now as then. We host this luncheon every year to recognize law firms and individuals who are making critical contributions in the fight to protect our civil liberties and our civil rights. We also honor those in the media who have chosen to use their voices to highlight injustice. Today, we thank them for standing with the ACLU in our effort to achieve a more perfect union. Despite the current administration's assault on the Constitution, we've scored many victories on many fronts. You'll hear about them today as we celebrate the people responsible for them. This luncheon is a time to be proud of the work that every one of you in this room has achieved for civil liberties. Our docket is full, so are our hearts. Let's take a look at a video that shows just how busy a year it's been.
Presenting the Education Equity Award, Sylvia Torres-Guillen, Director of Education Equity.
Five years ago, the ACLU and its partners helped pass a groundbreaking law that changed the way the state funds its school districts, mandating transparency and equity. The law provided school districts with a greater share of funds for low-income students, foster youth, and English learners, requiring improved services for these students. Shortly after, we noticed that LAUSD was breaking the new law, diverting millions of dollars away from these high-need students. We immediately demanded that they redirect funding. They refused, and we prepared to sue. We reached out to Community Coalition and asked if they would be willing to serve as a plaintiff to make sure that any relief that we would get would reflect the community's needs. It was a difficult decision. They realized they would jeopardize their relationship with LAUSD, which controlled access to the schools and the students. Despite the risk, they courageously agreed to stand up to LA's highest needs students for them. Ms. Reina Frias, an LAUSD parent, also agreed to fight for her community and serve as a plaintiff. Covington and Burling joined as co-counsel, spending hundreds of hours providing critical resources and expertise. Together, we prevailed, and after 3 years of hard-fought litigation, and thanks to Covington's tireless efforts and Community Coalition's courage, passion, and persistence, we won a record-breaking settlement requiring LAUSD provide more than $150 million in additional services for high-need students. Directed at 50 of its most under-resourced schools in East and South LA. And now, students will have better access to the classes that they need. Teachers will get more support, schools will get more counselors and social workers, and create better restorative justice programs. We are grateful for their immense contributions and very proud to call them our partners. Please join me in honoring Community Coalition and Covington with the Education Equity Award.
On behalf of Covington and Burling, I would like to thank the ACLU for this recognition. Covington considers pro bono participation to be one of its defining traits, and we are always honored to work alongside the ACLU. Covington's involvement in the LAUSD litigation began in 2014, but the funding scheme involved in the litigation can trace its roots back to 2008. It took 5 years for California to pass legislation based on this 2008 proposal, and the ACLU was there advocating for the legislation at every step. In 2013, when the new funding legislation passed, Governor Brown recognized in his State of the State speech that equal treatment for children in unequal situations is not justice. To me, this statement has always captured the reason we started this fight. We have fought hard and successfully to force LAUSD to use the funds it receives based on the status of students as low-income, foster youth, or English language learners to address the needs of these students. The Covington team has been particularly inspired by our work with the ACLU and Sylvia, Victor, and Anna, and their determination to make a real change for California's high-need students. In his book, Tattoos on the Heart, Father Boyle, the founder of Homeboy Industries, speaks of the importance of standing with those in need. Through this lawsuit, the ACLU has made it known to not only LAUSD, but to all California school districts that it will continue to stand and fight until every student has access to a quality education. Covington is proud to partner with the ACLU and has been honored to represent the Community Coalition of South Los Angeles and Miss Frias, and to stand with them in the fight for a better education for California's high-need youth. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. That's how we do it in South LA. My name is Alberto Retana. I'm president, CEO of Community Coalition. I have to tell you that this lawsuit and this award means so much to me because it was the first decision I made with our collective on the first day of my job. And for me, it reflected the kind of decisions that I wanted to reflect as a leader at Community Coalition. To take bold, courageous decisions, because to be quite honest, the decision was not that difficult. Jeopardize our access to campus or jeopardize the future of our children. And it became clear to me that we will never jeopardize the future of our children. We will always put our students first in front of the interests of corporations, in front of the interests of high needs kids, in front of the interests of those that are getting in the way of our children's future. So for that, I'm grateful to ACLU for allowing us the opportunity to weigh in. I want to thank the ACLU attorney Sylvia, Victor, Hector for your leadership, public advocates, and Laura and Michael at Covington, because there were many difficult moments during the 2 years of engagement, 3 years of engagement, including when the LAUSD presented us with a counteroffer that excluded attorney fees. But the ACLU agreed to move forward and forego compensation for the benefit of African American and Latino high-need students. It is a reminder that when we get together and we join forces and we fight, we win. Thank you.
Thank you, Alberto. Good afternoon. I'm Aurea Montes Rodriguez, and I am so honored to stand with everyone who's here on this stage. Everyone worked tirelessly for 3 years, including late night calls on Friday nights, weekends. I'm also extremely grateful to the ACLU because this settlement victory set a precedent and served as a catalyst for another big win that we just enjoyed on April 10th when the LAUSD board unanimously voted to adopt an updated Student Equity Need Index, which serves as a tool to identify highest need schools in the LAUSD and serves as a foundation to distribute the funds based on level of need. Another huge accomplishment with the updated Student Equity Need Index is that it takes into account the health and safety variables, including exposure to gun violence, which students, parents, administrators, through our organizing, told us that really impacts and worsens the achievement and opportunity gap for students in communities like South Los Angeles. This win and investment is going to result in an initial $25 million this year, this academic year, and beginning in 2019, there's going to be a commitment to use the equity-based formula to allocate funding for a permanent budget line items totaling a minimum of $263 million per year to highest need schools. Again, this remarkable win wouldn't have been possible without the lawsuit settlement. So thank you, ACLU.
Presenting the Access to Justice Award, Michael Kaufman, the Sullivan and Cromwell Access to Justice Senior Staff Attorney.
Hi, everybody. Cesar Matias fled his native Honduras a decade ago to escape the severe persecution he suffered as a gay man. He came here seeking protection, but instead he received more punishment, this time at the hands of our own government. After he arrived in the United States, Cesar settled in Southern California, where he worked as a hairdresser and was free to live openly and without fear. But in 2012, Immigration and Customs Enforcement picked him up and threw him in an immigration prison. They kept him locked up for 4 years and 3 months while Cesar applied for asylum before the immigration courts. Now, you must be saying to yourself, surely there was a good reason to lock this man up for 4 years. A serious threat, right? No. Shortly after he was first imprisoned, an immigration judge found that Cesar was not a danger and ordered him released on a $3,000 bond, slightly above the statutory minimum bond amount. Cesar remained locked up for years, not because he was a risk to anyone, but simply because he was poor and could not afford to pay a $3,000 bond. In 2016, we joined with Skadden Arps, Slate, Meagher, and Flum and brought a lawsuit on behalf of Cesar and the hundreds like him. The relief we seek is simple but critical, that immigration officials consider a non-citizen's ability to pay when setting the conditions of his release. In the years since, we've been able to secure rulings that have restored some measure of justice to the immigration detention system. In 2017, the Ninth Circuit issued a first-of-its-kind decision finding that the government's bail practices are likely unconstitutional. The panel decision, authored by the recently departed Judge Stephen Reinhart, held that the government's policies, quote, risk detention that accomplishes little more than punishing a person for his poverty. Over the years, the past 3 years, Skadden has worked tirelessly on the case. Their attorneys spend days traveling to detention centers to gather evidence and meet with prospective clients. They have taken a lead role in all aspects of the litigation. And due to their expert work, we are poised to secure permanent relief for the class in the coming year and hopefully ensure that there are no more people like Cesar who are needlessly incarcerated merely because they are poor. Skadden has been a tremendous partner to the ACLU on a range of projects over the years, but their work on this case has been particularly exemplary. So please join me in congratulating Skadden on this well-deserved Access to Justice Award.
Let me begin by saying, wow, what an amazing experience has been working alongside the ACLU since we began work on this lawsuit more than 2.5 years ago. As many of you know, immigration law is perhaps the most difficult area of law out there. I must say that the ACLU lawyers on this team, Michael Kaufman, Michael Tan, Stephen Kang, would be qualified by any judge in the country as immigration law experts. It is no accident that the Ninth Circuit ruled in our favor. Now let me say thank you on behalf of Skadden. The firm is honored to be the 2018 recipient of the Access to Justice Award. The firm has a strong commitment to providing pro bono legal work on immigration matters, so this award is particularly meaningful and will be prominently displayed within our offices. I'll quickly introduce you to the Skadden team, who stands to my left. A couple of the team members, John Korvac and Matt Delgado, were unfortunately unable to make it. They would have been here, but I don't think John's bride would have been too happy if they were. So behind me is the rest of the team. First, we have Matt Sloan, a partner who has overseen our work on the case. Having a criminal law background, Matt immediately recognized, like Judge Reinhardt did, the fundamental injustice of not considering a non-citizen's ability to pay when setting bond or other alternative conditions of release. Next, we have Winston Chow. Winston stepped up big to play an instrumental role in transforming this case from one brought by 2 individuals to one brought by hundreds. Thanks in large part to his efforts, our class action is certified under 3 different procedural rules, and it is no surprise that the government did not even bother to appeal that ruling. Mike Hidalgo. Mike played a key role in developing a persuasive way to present this case to the court. It is no accident that Judge Reinhardt found certain of our arguments to be, and I quote, common sense propositions. That seldom happens. Just ask any judge. Mike is also a fluent Spanish speaker, which came in handy many times, including in providing notice to class members of the Ninth Circuit's ruling and their rights. Catherine Thompson. After the Ninth Circuit ruled in our favor, Catherine joined the case and immediately represented a non-citizen during his bond hearing, making sure that her client would not be detained for years, like Cesar, merely because he was poor. Since then, Catherine has volunteered to help in all aspects of the litigation, and I mean all. Olivia Powar. She has only been a lawyer for a few months now, but she jumped at the opportunity to be a part of this case, given its worthy cause. She has been battling the defendants and obtaining the necessary documents and data that we will need to secure permanent injunctive relief. To say that our wins on the discovery front have been blowouts would be an understatement. We have a perfect record, thanks to her. Candace Spoon. Candace is a managing law clerk at Skadden. As you may imagine, this case has a ton of moving parts, but Candace keeps us on top of things and ahead of the game. Candace epitomizes the dedication this team has shown in providing access to justice. Many a late night, Candace was there to make sure that our briefs were perfect and filed on time. And last and least, I am Doug Smith. My everyday practice focuses largely on antitrust and tax-related class actions, but it is this case that has and will provide justice to many that stands way, way above the rest of the other cases I work on. It is nice to be honored. Thank you.
Welcome Amanda Goad, Senior Staff Attorney.
Jessie Meehan is a musician who was with her band on her way to rock out at the Los Angeles Pride Festival in 2017 when she stopped into the Walgreens store at Sunset and Vine, bought a snack, and asked to use their restroom. What happened next was an affront to Jessie's dignity and a clear violation of California's Unruh Civil Rights Act. Though often it's transgender people who get hurt by bathroom gender policing, Jessie is not transgender. She's a gender nonconforming woman, someone assigned female at birth who all her life has encountered problems as a result of others' narrow expectations for what it means to be a woman. Undeterred, Jessie walked directly to the ACLU's SoCal table at Pride seeking support. Though Jessie submitted her own complaint to Walgreens corporate, it took a demand letter from us and some further discussion before Walgreens did the right thing without our having to go to court. As Jessie explains in this coming video, which garnered widespread attention, Walgreens has long billed itself as an LGBTQ-friendly company, so we're grateful they chose inclusion over hypocrisy. Are you listening, Greyhound?
Hi, my name's Jessie, and I'm reaching out because I had a very upsetting experience. When I think of Walgreens, I think of an ally, a company that really supports progressive issues, which I really respect a lot. I was very surprised and shocked today with the treatment I received when I visited Walgreens. We're on our way to Pride. On the way there, there's a Walgreens on Vine and Sunset. You know, I'd like to use women's room. She's like, can you open that one for me? She's like, oh, I can't do that. And I said, okay, why can't you do that? And she's like, because you're dressed like a man, you have to use the men's room. I am a woman. I identify as female. You can't tell me which one to use. It's illegal to do that. If this happened there, God only knows where else it happens. I've been discriminated against my whole life based on my appearance, based on looking too male. It's the first time that I actually said something about it, did something about it. And I can imagine thousands of people that don't do anything about it when they feel bad about themselves.
Express this love, free yourself with the moments we got. Show up for the freedom to keep on loving. Pride is fun, and so are the thoughts I'm expressing myself underneath the sun. If we keep the place safe, we can do what we want.
Please welcome to the stage Hector Viagra, Executive Director of the ACLU of Southern California.
Inscribed in stone at the main library at Columbia University Law School is a quotation meant to inspire. A man is but what he knoweth. I don't know what man wrote it, but I can tell you this, I hated it. Every time I saw it, I scoffed, then got angry. When my dad and namesake came to this country in 1963, he didn't speak a single word of English. He had finished only 6 grades of school, and his only job skill was making shoes. Yet my dad made it possible for me to sit in that library. For many years, he worked 2 jobs, 7 days, and 90-plus hours a week. And even as my dad prepared to leave by 5 a.m., and drive 50 miles to work, he always found the time to check in on me and my sisters, adjusting the covers that had fallen off as we slept. As a child, I appreciated it. Now, as a father myself, I'm amazed by it. I knew in my bones that if my dad didn't measure up, the problem wasn't with him, but with the measure itself. My dad, who passed away in late February, taught me all I needed to know about family and hard work and sacrifice by the eloquence of his example. In late March, I lost another important figure in my life when Judge Stephen Reinhardt passed away. After graduating from Columbia Law School, I clerked for the judge in 1995. He was brilliant. He kneweth a lot. He had a tremendous command of the law and the English language, but his knowledge did not, by any means, define him. You'll hear more about him later, but what always stood out for me was his absolute commitment to doing justice. He worked tirelessly. I like to joke that it was a 2-year clerkship, but he made you do it in 1 year. And even after 3 years of law school, he taught me all I needed to know about justice, both how precious it is and how difficult it is to achieve. Since the president was inaugurated, I've often been asked how I feel about the country and where it's headed. I always think about my dad and the judge and the lessons I've learned from other shining examples, like longtime ACLU board member Signe Mochtinger, whom we are honoring today. And I think about how legacies take shape gradually over a lifetime by putting your heart and talent and effort into the people and causes you care about. I cannot predict what tomorrow will bring, but I am certain that our nation's future won't come down simply to what we know or even what we believe. It'll depend on our willingness, day in and day out, to put our values into action. If we have the unrelenting will and determination to stand for what we believe, we will ultimately prevail. The ACLU, I'm proud, so proud to say, has embodied this spirit of taking action, letting our deeds, not our words, speak for us, and demonstrate who and what we truly care about. When the president was elected, the ACLU vowed to see him in court if he tried to make good on his unconstitutional and un-American campaign promises. Whenever his administration has taken such action, the ACLU has made good on its vow, and then some. Trump has now been president for 70 weeks, and the ACLU has already sued his administration more than 80 times. That's more than one suit a week. We fought the Muslim ban. We have fought the ban against transgender men and women serving in the military. We fought the administration's effort to prevent immigrant women from having an abortion. We've challenged the president's decision to target 200,000 people from what he called shithole countries. We've challenged the revocation of young immigrants' DACA status. We've challenged the new rules decimating Obamacare's contraceptive mandate. We've sued to stop the government from searching travelers' smartphones and laptops without warrants at the border. And now we've had to sue to stop the administration from forcibly separating children from their immigrant parents. We've achieved some important victories, but there have been significant setbacks too. We will persevere, but we have so much work ahead of us, and we cannot possibly do this alone. We need your help. So I challenge everyone in this room today to think about the legacy you will leave. We face a defining choice between competing visions of America. Let's band together to reject Trump's fearful, selfish, and dystopian vision of America and the legacy he and his enablers are trying to leave for this country. Let's put our values into action. Let's fight for an expansive and inclusive vision of America, one that recognizes that our rights, our humanity, our dignity are all bound together. Let's make clear that America is not about I and me and mine, but we and us and ours. We can't afford to stand still or stay silent. We must keep giving of ourselves. In front of you are donation cards. Please fill them out and place them in the bowls at your tables. Strengthen your legacy with the ACLU. If you're brand new to the ACLU, start your journey with us right now. If you're already a supporter, please continue your generosity. Your support today ensures that the ACLU of Southern California has the resources to continue its 95-year legacy of protecting and defending everyone's rights at this most critical time. We now face a president with no sense of our history, no sense of our ideals, and he is threatening the legacy we've inherited as Americans. Let's show him what defines us, what unites us as Americans. Let's work to pass on a legacy of justice and equality for all. Thank you for standing with the ACLU. Thank you.
Presenting the Homeless Rights Advocacy Award, Adriana Wong, Staff Attorney.
2016, the city of Hesperia decided to ban transitional housing for previously incarcerated people experiencing homelessness. At the same time, the city adopted an ordinance that forced landlords to evict people living in rental housing whenever the police suspected a crime or code violation there, then placed the tenants on a rental housing blacklist. The city council clearly expressed their intent to decrease the number of low-income renters in their city and to force out anyone with a criminal record. Hesperia's mayor compared the city's effort to exterminating cockroaches. The city's first target was Victor Valley Family Resource Center, a nonprofit organization dedicated to ending homelessness by providing critical time interventions to previously incarcerated people in the form of housing and wraparound services. The law firm of Jenner and Block joined our litigation on behalf of the center to enforce a court order against city officials set on finding a way to force the center and the housing and services it offers out of existence, even though a judge had concluded such efforts were likely unconstitutional. As a result of the determined efforts of Jenner and Block attorneys, the city ultimately repealed the ordinances we challenged, and we were able to obtain a settlement for our clients that both compensated them for the thousands of dollars of fees and fines assessed against them and cleared their names from the rental housing blacklist. While the struggle to end criminalization of people experiencing homelessness and to affirm the dignity of all people continues, the work of Jenner and Block represents an important step in the right direction. Please join me in honoring Jenner and Block with the Homelessness Rights Advocacy Award.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Christopher Lindsay of Jenner and Block, and I'll be accepting on behalf of the firm. I have very proudly been an ACLU member for years. VVFRC is an amazing organization run by very dedicated people. After graduating from the transitional housing, around 85% of VVFRC's clients remain employed or enrolled in school and transitioned into permanent housing, and more than 95% of their clients do not recidivate. Given that track record, it's precisely the type of organization that we should be supporting, not targeted. Given that, it was genuinely our pleasure to join this litigation and assist in the important work that the ACLU began. Throughout, we worked closely with Adriana, who always impressed me with her amazing work and dedication to the cause. This case was intensely litigated against what the court itself called obstructionist defendants. Given the difficulty of the opposition, our success would not have been possible without the dedicated work of a large team. So I'd like to recognize Brian Addisman, Ben Brysek, Calvin Mohammadi, Sean Nelson, Daisy Zhu, Anna Lyon, and especially the leadership of the people on stage with me, Andrew Sullivan, Kate Spellman, and AJ Thomas. I'd also like to add, for myself, I am very proud and genuinely appreciative for the support that everyone at Jenner and Block gave to this matter and dedicates to all of our pro bono causes. Because of the changes in the law inspired by our lawsuit, VVRC will be able to continue doing the great work that it does, which is the most important result of the case, and we are very proud to have been part of the effort. So thank you.
Welcome Peter Eliasberg, Chief Counsel and Mannheim Family Attorney for First Amendment Rights, and Ahilan Aralanantham, Director of Advocacy.
Good afternoon. I was fortunate enough to clerk for Judge Stephen Reinhardt in 1995 and 1996. Judge Reinhardt had a judicial philosophy. He believed to the core of his being that the federal courts should be the branch of government where the poor and the powerless could vindicate their rights. He never concealed this belief, he never apologized for it, nor should he have, and it unquestionably affected the way he viewed every single case that came in front of him. But there was another, less known, but just as important aspect to Judge Reinhardt that was fundamental to who he was. He brought extraordinary rigor to the process of judging, and it affected every case that he addressed. When I first started clerking for him, I assumed, wrongly it turns out, that he would pay more attention and care more about the high-profile civil rights cases that he dealt with than others. But nothing was further from the truth. Over and over again, I watched him work tirelessly on, indeed agonize over, the right answer to legal questions in every case he dealt with: contract disputes, Social Security disability claims, and criminal appeals. He did not lazily adopt the arguments presented in the better briefs by the more polished lawyers. Instead, with every case, he dug deeply into the record and the relevant precedent with unmatched intensity, because in the end, he had to be sure that he was reaching the correct result. I still marvel more than 20 years later how he at the level of intensity and work he put in for more than 30 years, because it was a pace that exhausted me in 1 year.
The judge taught the virtues of rigorous work that Peter just described to generations of public interest lawyers. Just in the ACLU SoCal office, there have been at least 7 former Judge Reinhardt law clerks who worked for a combined 81 years as attorneys for the ACLU. And that's a really important aspect of his legacy. He actively steered many of us towards public interest law. And during my clerkship, I remember I once asked him if I should wait. Is this a bad time to go into the field given the increasingly hostile climate for public interest litigation that we're seeing? And this was in 1999. I still remember what he said. He said, all the immigrants and refugees you want to help, can they afford to wait? Later that year, he gave me a gift, a biography of Nelson Mandela. And he wrote a note in the cover, a portion of which I really wanted to share with you all this afternoon. He said, "This country desperately needs young people who will bring about a fundamental change in many of our basic attitudes and practices. Individuals do make the difference. We're not condemned to suffer the type of leadership that we're experiencing now, as long as there are idealists willing to fight for the principles they believe in. You have a wonderful opportunity to do good. Make the most of it. And never get too tired, discouraged, or give up. Just redouble your efforts and plunge back into the battle. Remember always that you're on the right side and that we need you. I look forward to the rest of your clerkship, and then go get him." We'll miss him.
Presenting the Immigrant Justice Award, Andres Kwan, Equal Justice Works Emerson Fellow.
If you're not a U.S. citizen and you serve in the U.S. Armed Forces, that is, you go into harm's way, risking life and limb for this country, you become a citizen. Well, let me rephrase. You should become a citizen, at a minimum. Folks, citizenship based on military service is an assumption, a rather reasonable assumption, that countless non-citizen veterans made, only to find out, as they face mandatory deportation after encounters with the criminal justice system, that they actually were not U.S. citizens. In many cases, they were represented by under-resourced court-appointed attorneys and entered pleas uninformed and unaware that they would be deported as a result of their pleas, in violation of their Sixth Amendment right to effective counsel. And then, once in immigration court, many of these veterans could not afford lawyers to defend them. Over 3 years ago, we learned of the infuriating plight of veterans whose service our federal government gladly used and whom it honorably discharged, only to then discard them into oblivion, deport them to countries most have left as toddlers, and banish them forever, or at least until death. The only way deported veterans could come back to the U.S. was in a casket for a proper military burial. Things have changed since then. With Latham & Watkins lawyers, we went to Tijuana 3 years ago and met with deported veterans to find some way to bring them back home. Together, we've worked to increase the veterans' access to services and benefits they're entitled to. We have successfully sought Governor Brown's pardons for 3 deported veterans, and thus far, we brought 3 veterans home: Daniel Torres, Marco Chavez, and Hector Barajas, the leader and founder of the Deported Veterans Support House, also known as the Bunker. After being banished for years, they were able to spend this Memorial Day surrounded by their loved ones. And folks, by the way, this never happens. So Latham & Watkins, led by Colleen Smith, has been with us every step of the way. For your tremendous partnership, we, the ACLU Southern California, and the veterans whose lives you have helped dramatically change for the better, are incredibly grateful. We're honored to present the Immigrant Justice Award to Latham and Watkins.
Good afternoon. My name is John Wilson, and I'm joined by Taiga Takahashi, James Arcelius, and Diego Flores, who are some of the few among many Latham and Watkins attorneys that worked on this project. And on behalf of Latham, I'm grateful and proud to accept this award. The firm has always shown a very deep commitment to community engagement, and most of these efforts quite naturally run through our pro bono program, through which attorneys and staff contributed over 240,000 hours of legal services in 2017 alone. Our work spanned the globe and nearly every area of public interest law, from veteran support to immigration and criminal justice reform to housing, disability rights, and LGBTQ issues. Latham has collaborated with the ACLU of Southern California for many years. In the course of our partnership, we pursued education rights litigation and partnered on strategic impact litigation. And at a time when immigrants of all stripes are under siege, it is both a moral and a professional imperative to stand up and resist injustice where we see it. I'm proud of the ACLU's longstanding efforts to assist veterans, and on this project in particular, in partnership with Nathan Fletcher and the Honorably Discharged, Dishonorably Deported organization, I'm proud that Latham has been involved in this effort, and I speak for all of my colleagues at Latham, both here and in the almost 10 offices around the world that assisted with this effort, when I say it's been both a great privilege and an honor to work with the ACLU. We're proud that we've been able to make a positive contribution. Both our lives and our practice of law have been greatly enhanced through this work. Our work with the ACLU is something that we personally take great pride in, and for me, was one of my most rewarding experiences throughout my entire career. We hope to bring back even more deported veterans as our work on these issues continues, and we're grateful to the ACLU for its support, in particular to Jenny Pasquarella, Grace Lee, Bardis Vakili, and others on the ACLU SoCal team who've provided us with ongoing support and guidance. You all make it possible for us to engage in this way, and for that, and for everything that you do in support of our most vulnerable, underserved communities, as we're hearing about today, we at Latham & Watkins are very grateful. Thank you very much.
Presenting the Courageous Advocate Award, Ahilan Aralanantham.
Bambajan Bamba is an extremely talented and successful actor with roles in Grey's Anatomy, The Good Place, Suicide Squad, and the fantastic film Black Panther. Last year, when the Trump administration announced its intention to cancel the DACA program, he decided to do something about it, despite the great personal risk involved for him and his family. The image of undocumented immigrants we too often get from the media, and certainly the one that this administration has tried to beat into our heads, is of people from Latin America coming here to steal our jobs. And while I have the utmost respect for anyone from anywhere in the world who comes here to build a better life for themselves and their family, which is what my parents did, it's important to remember that the population living in legal limbo because of our nation's failure to create a fair immigration system is extraordinarily diverse. It includes not just people from Latin America, but also from Asia, Europe, and Africa. And it includes people in every walk of life: waiters, journalists, gardeners, doctors, and yes, also actors. Last year, in response to the administration's hateful treatment of immigrants, Bambajan publicly revealed that he too is undocumented. Born in the Ivory Coast, he came to this country when his family fled political instability, but the asylum process took so long, as it so often does, that by the time his family won status, he was 21, too old to be included in their application. Bamba John is one of thousands of people suffering injustice at the hands of our immigration system. The ACLU has engaged in litigation and political advocacy to protect those with DACA status from the Trump administration's attempts to strip it. We've also spent 4 years, hard years, working to protect children facing deportation, from our ongoing litigation to establish the right to appointed counsel for that vulnerable group, to more recently our lawsuit in the Miss L case to stop the absolutely horrific family separations that are happening now at our border. Bamba John has now brought his important voice to seek justice for those like him who deserve a fair immigration system. For that decision, we're pleased to present to him the Courageous Advocate Award. Bamba John Jamba.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm always surprised when I get a Courageous Award because when I made the decision to announce my status publicly, I didn't feel the feeling of courage. I felt a lot of fear. And someone said that courage is not devoid of fear, but moving forward even though you feel the fear. So I also want to add that moving forward, especially when you have the fear and you have someone by your side to support you, to pray with you, and to lift you up. So I want to recognize my wife, Ganohon Ansonsa, who's sitting at table 22, for her undying support. She's been the love of my life since I was 18, a senior in high school. And that was a long time ago. So I want to thank the ACLU for honoring me and for the magnificent work that they're doing in our nation to create the America that we want to lead for our children, and we envision. So thank you, ACLU. I look forward to working together with you to win more seats in November. I want to share just a couple of stories that have happened in the news recently. One was of the African Superman in Paris. Have anyone heard of seeing the story of the migrant from Mali who migrated through Libya and through the Mediterranean Ocean to end up in France and be at a cafe one day with his date and seeing a child on a 6th floor building hanging and about to fall off, and literally scaling 6 floors to save that child. So that story was so powerful to me. When I saw it, I was like, wow, that is amazing. And the French government, who is so backwards in how they treat their immigrants, even they were able to see his heroic act and give him full citizenship. So I say all that to say, in the light of heroic acts, especially of our undocumented veterans that come back, that died for this nation, and still sometimes are not being honored with citizenship. There are stories that we read sometimes in history that tells us, oh my God, how did people allow this to happen? And this is a moment that we are living right now. When you read horrific stories of children being separated from their families at the border, when you read stories like the 17-year-old Manuel Pacheco, who was a DACA recipient and deported back to Mexico and had his throat slit and was murdered a month before his high school graduation. You start having feelings of rage. And people say that rage is negative. But I like to propose that rage is only negative when you don't turn it to do something positive. When you don't turn it around to make change. The Bible inspires me all the time. And the courage that I had was from God. The Bible inspires me that never get tired of doing good. Never give up, because in due time, if you don't give up, you will have success. So thank you again, and let's not give up, and let's keep fighting for the America that we want to see for ourselves and for our children's children. Thank you.
Presenting the Lifetime Advocate for Justice Award, Steve Rohde, ACLU of Southern California board member.
A year before the ACLU of Southern California was founded in 1923, a boy was born in a Jewish neighborhood of Kilsa, a small town in Poland. In 1929, at the age of 7, Sidney Mochtinger emigrated with his family to Chicago, Illinois. Sidney's upbringing in Chicago from 1929 to 1940 was at the height of the Great Depression. His father, Morris, was a tailor and a proud member of the ILGWU. Morris only got paid by the piece, and the work was seasonal, and he often was laid off without a job. Sid was lucky to get a part-time summer job at the factory where his father worked, and he soon found out how competitive it was to get a job among the old and the young people of different races and religions at the factory. He learned to get along with people who were not like him. After the United States entered the Second World War on December 7, 1941, Sid enlisted in the U.S. Army Air Corps on his 20th birthday. He went through navigational school, became a navigator, and flew 43 missions in the South Pacific. For one of those missions, he and the members of his crew were awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. But among the small crew of 10, there was one guy who called Sid a dirty Jew. Sid would never forget the sting of anti-Semitism and being the brunt of hatred and bullying. After the war, Sid went to Northwestern University and Northwestern Law School, where he wrote law review articles on labor law. Upon graduation, he worked for the Department of Justice and the Internal Revenue Service in Washington, D.C. and Los Angeles, and he soon moved his growing family to L.A. He's very proud to be one of the founding fathers of the prominent law firm of Greenberg, Glusker, Fields, Kamen, and Mochtinger, where he continues to be involved to this day after 56 years with the firm. Since 1983, Sid has been an active member of the ACLU Foundation Board, serving on a variety of committees and helping to guide the organization through 35 years of civil liberties struggles, offering his special expertise on tax and nonprofit law, always with great charm and high spirits. Along with all of his colleagues, I have thoroughly enjoyed every opportunity I've had to work with Sid. He told me his most admired people, like Eason Monroe, Stanley Scheinbaum, and Ramona Ripston, who worked ceaselessly and with great passion and skill to help ordinary people understand complex civil liberties issues. But that could all be said of Sid. He's a great ambassador of the ACLU and is always eager to tell people how proud he is of this organization and all that it stands for. He is married to Paula and has 5 children, and I'm so glad to say all of them are with us today. For a lifetime dedicated to supporting justice and equality, and for decades of steadfast leadership, To the ACLU, it is my deepest personal honor, excuse me, to present Sydney Mochtinger with the 2018 Lifetime Advocate for Justice Award.
Sydney, it's my great honor to be able to present you this award. If anyone deserves the Lifetime Advocate for Justice Award, it's you.
My dad came to this country as an immigrant who didn't speak a word of English. He grew up incredibly poor, and he grew up deeply and intimately affected by the Holocaust. My dad wants to protect people from the things that he had to experience, and he also wants them to have the same opportunities that he had.
In Judaism, there are no saints, but if there were, Sydney would be one.
Sid Mochtinger is the Yoda of the ACLU. He is ageless, he is short of stature, but he is most of all brilliant and wise, and keeps those of us who are potentially impetuous from doing the wrong thing.
He's magnificent, he's warm, he's fun, and he's ageless, and he's lovable.
He lives his life as one person. He doesn't fool anybody. I just admire him greatly.
If you stopped him on the streets and asked him for directions, he would give you directions and make sure you got there.
We haven't had an argument or a quarrel in 60 some odd years. He's a gracious gentleman, charming, pleasant, bright, good company.
Our staff, I think, would rather work for Sid than anybody else. Most lawyers would rather be around him than virtually everyone else in the firm.
I put him to the test anytime, and he comes through. I am so lucky to be married to somebody that has this kind of values, standards for behavior, and who is so consistently loving.
If you appreciate my dad as a loving friend, a trusted colleague, a family member, donate to the ACLU of Southern California. This is what is meaningful to him. This will be his legacy.
When you see Sydney, a smile comes to your face. Everyone's always happy to see Sydney. Sydney, you have always been there for us, and we thank you so very much for your service.
Please welcome Sydney J. Mochtinger, recipient of the Lifetime Advocate for Justice Award.
This is totally overwhelming. I've forgotten my entire speech. I just can't get over what was said by Steve and all of you here. It just means so much to me. I just can't tell you how much. I want to thank Steve Rohde for that introduction. I've admired him for many years. He's been a leader in the ACLU, and it's an honor for me to have him introduce me. I've been with the ACLU for over 50 years, for 35 years on the Board of Education. And I was attracted to the principles of the ACLU, and they are dedicated to protection of and liberties under the Constitution for all people, regardless of race, color, gender, sexual orientation, and religion. I strongly believe in these principles. And for these many years I've been working with the ACLU, I've met men and women who strongly believe in what it stands for. These are certainly times when we need the ACLU. I think someone recently said that the ACLU is one of the organizations that is critical if we're going to stand up against what has been brought to us by our president. These are people at the ACLU who share my values, and I thank them for this award, and I thank them for the opportunity to be associated with them. President Jefferson stated that justice is the basis of all liberties. There's a phrase that always intrigued me, which is do justice. I think it comes from Hebrew. It's a strong two words, and the word justice is a word we've heard many times tonight. It has great strength. It could be a slogan by which we live. As you heard, I came from Poland at the age of 7, and I lived for most of my family to see injustice throughout the world, and including here in the United States. We are all affected by our upbringing and by what happens when they are children and by our own families. And I've certainly been impressed for my upbringing by my mother and father and the Jewish family I was raised in. It was a clear minority that was even more openly discriminated against than now. I was raised during the Depression, and I saw people lined up for a bowl of soup, homeless, without a job. You can't forget those things. My father always worried about anti-Semitism, and like most Jewish fathers of those days, he always worried about making a living for the family. I think I became a lawyer because I saw what happened to so many people who had no one to advocate for them. It's interesting that the award I have is the advocacy for justice, because I feel so strongly that if there is justice for all people, you wouldn't have the problems we have now. My first job was with the Department of Justice. I used to read all the detective books about law and watch Perry Mason stories. And I later became a lawyer, which I have been for so many years. I've been dedicated to the ACLU to help others, and I have to experience, and I've experienced murderous injustice throughout the country and throughout my long life. What we have now is a president and a Republican Congress who are champions of injustice. And we have Donald Trump as our president, whether we like it or not. We have discrimination against undocumented people, immigrants of different nationalities, people of color, of different races, of different religions. He discriminates against gays, lesbians, transgender people. He wants women to lose the right to choose and the right to an abortion. It's the policy of Trump to separate parents from their children when they are immigrants entering this country. And I read this morning in the paper that there are 100 people a day being tried for illegal immigration who have come through this country seeking some protection for them. I think there can't be anything more outrageous and heartrending than to see a child torn from his parents. There's also what we call economic justice. Every person should be entitled to a fair wage for his services. Every person should be entitled to affordable housing. There should be health care for all and a possibility for good education for children, like the public education I received. I actually was lucky to get my education because after serving over 3 years in the military, I was able to get the benefits that came to those of us who had served in the military. So for 3 years, I was able to go through law school, and something that I never thought as a child I'd be able to accomplish. One of Trump's main assaults, and the way he thinks he can succeed in what he's doing, is he believes that the power of the executive department and the power of the president overrides the rights and powers of all branches of government and really over everyone. The people in this country have always relied on an independent Department of Justice to protect their basic rights. Trump's vision is that the Department of Justice is dependent on only him. He believes he has the right to do away with the Department of Justice if he so wishes to, which is very scary. The Bill of Rights gave everyone certain specific so-called inalienable rights. Under the Constitution, under the First Amendment, there should be freedom of speech. If anyone in this country dares to question Trump, he calls them names and puts them down. And one of the major defenses we've had in this country for protection is through the freedom of the press. The press is there to be able to have and it has the right to be critical of the president and to do that vigorously. And instead, what we find is that Trump would do everything he can to put the press so that it has no rights whatsoever. He calls journalists evil and worse people. One of our problems, we must win this election, and one of our problems is that the House of Representatives and the Senate have totally abandoned all rights that they have and given them to Trump. This is what is a major problem for us, because if we win this election, then the House of Representatives could pass laws that may start preventing him from proceeding with further acts that hurt all of us. It's critical that we win the Supreme Court, not the Supreme Court, the Senate, because if we win the Senate, then we can stop Trump if he seeks to appoint a new Supreme Court justice if a vacancy occurs. And he now has been appointing to the Federal District Court and to the Court of Appeals lawyers who believe what he believes in. So it's important that we do everything we can to win this election. Not only the federal election, but there are votes for the state offices. And those are also extremely important when we recognize that people who control our cities are the ones who can decide what kind of police we have creating our streets. They can control residential zoning for housing. Even in organizations such as the Board of Education can be important. And we have in many areas in this country where the Board of Education decides what books children should not read because they may be too progressive or they may be too critical of some of the things that this country did in the past that we're not proud of. It's in the South, if you read about the Civil War, you don't see a word about the fact that the South was fighting for slavery. What you read instead is that the South was fighting for the states' rights. And this is another illustration where our unwillingness to discuss the issues that slavery has caused so many of our wonderful people in this country is still an issue that is dividing all of us. We must do everything we can to win this election, and a lot depends on how successful we are. I think the election we just had for primary is one that certainly is not clear that we're going to be able to succeed in what we're seeking to have for us. So in the election in November, we must do what we can. And in this area, this time again, the ACLU is critical. It is one of the most important organizations in this country that stands up to Trump and what he stands for. I look around and I see how fortunate, how lucky I am. I have my wife with me here, who's 93 years old. We've been married for over 60 years. And I don't think I could accomplish what I have without her support and without her love. My 5 children are here, and I'm proud of every one of them and of their spouses, who I think also is my children. And if I had another hour and a half, I would tell you about my beautiful grandchildren. I also want to mention something about Greenberg-Lusker. It was in the year 1962 that Arthur Greenberg called me and asked me if I would join him and about 2 or 3 other people with a firm that they had already organized. It was the luckiest choice that I've had, and I certainly accepted. I've had all these years the pride that I have in being part of Greenberg-Lusker and seeing it grow into the organization that it is today. And it's the people in that firm that I most cherish, and I thank all of you in the firm for supporting me all of these years. And to all of you there, all of you here, all of my friends, again, thank you so much for making today such a meaningful day for me.
Please welcome to the stage Stacy Horth Newbert and Nichelle Carr, ACLU Foundation of Southern California board members and annual luncheon co-chairs.
Hi, I'm Stacy, and I joined the ACLU when I was 17 years old. I think I'm hoping to match Sydney's record. You see, I am a military brat, and as a military brat, I've always seen the ACLU as the civilian defender of our country, protecting the basic liberties upon which our nation was founded, and to which we must constantly struggle to preserve and protect. I see supporting the ACLU as my patriotic duty.
Hi, I'm Nichelle. I joined the ACLU because it gives me a way to be actively involved in all of the issues I'm passionate about, rather than having to choose just 1 or 2 at the expense of others. It's really important to me to ensure that everyone, especially underserved communities of color and young people, know that the ACLU is out here in these streets fighting for them every day. With our fundamental rights under attack daily, involvement in the ACLU is more important than ever.
In this defining moment in history, we are thinking about what our legacies will be, and we know many of you are as well.
Ensure your legacy today by giving as generously as you can. Please complete the contribution form on your tables and put it in the glass bowls on your table before you leave. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Introducing the voices of our city choir, Eve Garrow, homelessness policy analyst and advocate.
Good afternoon. The ACLU Dignity for All project fights to protect and extend the rights of people experiencing homelessness. Some good news from the project. Under a groundbreaking settlement achieved with our co-counsel, Paul Hastings, the City of Laguna Beach will soon provide a host of improvements to ensure that people with disabilities have equal access to its homelessness services. I would like to take a moment to recognize 3 very important guests who contributed to this success. Leonard Porto was one of our most valuable witnesses and a tireless supporter of the team. And we could not have achieved this resolution without the courage and commitment of our named plaintiffs, Michael Newman and David Sestini. Gentlemen, it has been an honor and a pleasure to work with you. Please stand while we congratulate you and thank you. This is what it's all about. Next, I am so pleased to welcome Voices of Our City Choir to this event. Founded in 2016 by Steph Johnson and Nina Deering, Voices of Our City Choir was created in response to the housing and homelessness crisis in San Diego. The choir does more than create incredibly beautiful music. It has also helped dozens of its unsheltered singers to secure a safe place to live, assists members with clothing, food, transportation, and connection to services, and engages in advocacy to demand an end to the criminalization of homelessness. This month, catch the choir in The Homeless Chorus Speaks, a PBS documentary featuring many of the people on the stage today. Please help me welcome the incredible and amazing Voices of Our City Choir.
Where we
Welcome to the stage, Melissa Goodman, Audrey Ermis Director, LGBTQ Gender and Reproductive Justice Project.
Hi, everyone. All right. Misogyny turned into government policy. Suppressing sexuality while rape and sexual assault are not only accepted, but ritualized. Economic control to enforce gender norms and aggressive policing of gender conformity. Erasure of LGBTQ people. Stripping people of the power to decide if and when to parent. The Handmaid's Tale is an extraordinary, exhilarating, and excruciating depiction of a heightened version of now. The ACLU is battling a regime that has held young, pregnant immigrant women hostage in shelters to keep them from accessing abortion. Without successful ACLU intervention in a pending class action case, the Trump administration would have forced hundreds of young women to have children against their will. We're suing to stop the inhumane and immoral practice of physically ripping children and infants away from immigrant parents. We're suing to stop policies that allow your boss to take away contraception coverage because the company doesn't approve of women having premarital sex. We're trying to stop the federal government from putting clinics that provide or even just refer for abortions out of business. We're advocating for safety and equal opportunity in the workplace. We're tackling male-dominated environments from the docks of LA and Long Beach to Hollywood, industries that have kept women out, subjected them to hostile environments, punished them for parenting, and paid them less. We're helping write and pass landmark anti-discrimination and harassment legislation. We're working to destroy gender stereotypes that hurt everyone, like workplace policies that give unequal parental leave to men, enforcing the assumption that it's a mother's job to parent or that there are parents of different genders. And we're examining how to reform laws that punish women for their sexuality and need for economic survival, like laws that criminalize sex work. But The Handmaid's Tale and its incredible characters rising up, fighting back, also embody the moment in which we live. A moment of women's power, defiance, and fury. A fury that's bubbling to the surface, has us speaking our truths, and is causing seismic changes in our workplaces, our institutions, and our culture. We're thankful to those in the media who use their voices to call attention to injustices, and we are pleased to honor The Handmaid's Tale.
Presenting the Social Responsibility in the Media Award, Warren Littlefield, Executive Producer of The Handmaid's Tale.
Good afternoon. What an honor it is to be here with all of you today and to celebrate the outstanding work of ACLU. Joining me up here on stage, Samira, Amanda, and Max, to share our love with Bruce. We live in interesting times, and to clarify by that, clarify interesting, I think what I mean is really fucking crazy. We have an administration that either has no comprehension of the rule of law or simply chooses to ignore it. The UN has now condemned our immigration policy, and the number of federal judges that the Trump administration is appointing will affect the quality of our freedom in our lives for decades to come. So what do we do? Where do we turn? Well, we certainly need organizations like the ACLU now more than ever. We need leadership. We need humanity. Bruce Miller is a leader and a visionary, and you know, he's kind of a human guy too. It's a great honor for me to know Bruce, to count him as a friend, and to have the privilege of working with him each and every day. He is a loving husband, not quite as many years as Sydney has, but he's well on his way with Tracy. He's a devoted father of 3 children. And Bruce commands a great respect among his peers for his exceptional skill
in telling the story of The Handmaid's Tale. Bruce began the process of making Handmaids with the goal of honoring Margaret Atwood's vision and making a good television show. But you know what? Something happened. The world changed. Trump became president, and we found ourselves part of the resistance. Armed with his pen, Bruce does not preach, but rather he asks the audience to remember who we were and open our eyes to where we are going. Despite the harsh world of Gilead that we as producers have created, or even the real world, that pre-Gilead America that we seem to be living in, Bruce Miller manages, I think, every day to bring an optimism and to bring a large dollop of humor to his work and his engagement with all of us as artists. Bruce is a blessing. Please join me now in celebrating the vision and the leadership of Bruce Miller. Thank you. You get a plaque.
I get a plaque. Thank you, Warren, very much. You read it really well. I wrote it. Thank you to Warren and to the ACLU, and it's very nice to finally meet the people who have been sending me all those emails. I know they're fundraising, but it does keep you warm in Toronto in the winter to get all that nice love in the email. So this is an extraordinary honor. I accept on behalf of our devoted team that makes The Handmaid's Tale, our partners at MGM and Hulu, Warren, Elizabeth, and our cast and crew, some of whom made the trek down here. Television can be a small box, but it can have a very loud voice. This honor really belongs to a few remarkable women, Samira and Amanda amongst them. Eileen Chaikin, who wrote the original script for the show, Reed Morano, who was a director in our first season and helped establish our show, Elizabeth Moss, who's our astonishing star and leader, my wife, Tracy, who's an astonishing star and leader as well, and Margaret Atwood, who is the mother of us all, who has, I want to be Margaret when I grow up, has more energy than anybody I know. I read The Handmaid's Tale when I was in college, and it was scary because it felt so real, even then, 35 years ago. It was in a new fiction class 35 years ago. And that feeling of reality is something we've tried to capture on the show. And the way we do that is with attention to detail. Anne Crabtree's hand-sewn costumes, all the paintings in the Waterford House are looted from the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. And to do that, we have to use lots and lots of experts. I generally don't know very much about anything. I got out of college and started to be a writer, so I still know the jobs you knew in kindergarten, like policeman and fireman and shopkeeper. Beyond that, I have no idea what any of you people do. But you work at what's called an LLC. That seems to be up here a lot. And we've gotten help from academics, from the UN, and very much so from the ACLU. So thank you both for this award and for your help. We did have one memorable call about female genital mutilation that we scheduled during lunch, which was really not a terrific idea, so I would say don't do that. But our agenda has always been on the show to ask what would really happen, and that means we have some painful phone calls. Our show is painful sometimes, hopeful, I hope, funny, and dark and light. It has pain and trauma because people's lives have pain and trauma. Not seeing that pain and trauma doesn't make it go away. It allows it to multiply, and I learned that from the ACLU. So please keep doing your work. Please keep sending me emails. Thank you very much.
Introducing the Equal Justice Award, Melanie Penny Ochoa, Staff Attorney.
It is hard for most of us to fathom that we could be handed a piece of paper that made it illegal to carry a cell phone, to have dinner in a neighborhood restaurant, to wear a white t-shirt, to visit a friend in a nearby home, or to stand in your own front lawn with your family. But for nearly 9,000 Los Angelinos, most, if not all, African American and Latino, this is exactly what happened to them. For decades, the city of Los Angeles has run a gang injunction program that subjected individuals to permanent restrictions, many with terms more restrictive than criminal probation, simply based on an LAPD officer's untested assertion that they were gang members. The accused had no opportunity to challenge these allegations and did not even know the facts on which these allegations were based. In 2013, the ACLU partnered with Munger, Tolles, and Olson to challenge the lack of due process provided to around 60 individuals added to an Orange County gang injunction. That was an important victory, but it was not enough to persuade Los Angeles to end its equally unconstitutional gang injunction process. But Munger was committed to fighting against this offensive practice. In 2016, we partnered again with Munger and were joined by criminal justice advocacy organization Urban Peace Institute to file a class action lawsuit against the city of Los Angeles to challenge the lack of due process provided to these 9,000 people. This case is still ongoing, but through Munger's rigorous advocacy and UPI's unmatched expertise, the team won an order prohibiting the city from enforcing its injunctions against our class. Pressure from this litigation also forced the city to drop nearly 7,500 individuals from its enforcement list, conceding that it lacked evidence that they were active gang members. Our success has also prompted other cities to provide new processes for people to challenge this designation before being subject to an injunction. While there is still work to be done, through the efforts of Munger and UPI, the once massive and unchecked Los Angeles gang injunctions as we know them will never return. Please join me in honoring Munger, Tolles, and Olson and Urban Peace Institute with the Equal Justice Award.
So I have some prepared remarks, but when I got here, I realized there's something I wanted to say to the people in this room first, which is I want to thank all of you for your support for this ACLU affiliate. I have friends who work at ACLUs around the country, and they're all jealous that it's the ACLU of SoCal that I get to work with. It's really a leader nationally, even within the ACLU. And one of the things that's so difficult to do is to bridge the world of the legal community with oppressed communities and with the grassroots activists and organizers that work in those communities. But this affiliate is really leading the way in how to do that. So I want to thank the ACLU of SoCal and for everybody here for that work. And it's because of that that we're able to partner with the ACLU. For those of you who don't know, the Urban Peace Institute is not a civil liberties organization per se. Our mission is violence reduction. Though many would have us believe that protecting civil liberties and protecting our communities from violence are goals that are in tension with one another, this team's work opposing gang injunctions shows that, in fact, policing that fails to put concerns for the civil liberties of communities front and center also fails to provide safety to those communities. Not only has gang injunction enforcement been unconstitutional, it's undermined community trust, increased gang cohesion, made it more difficult for gang members to mature out of gangs. None of that is good for public safety, and that's a concern equal to civil liberties and constitutionality. So we at the UPI are grateful for all those who've helped us advance both community safety and civil liberties. We thank our partners at the ACLU and at MTO. We thank our clients especially. We thank all the community activists and other lawyers working at gang injunctions. Nancy Wexler is here from the Ventura County Public Defender's Office, who's done great work opposing gang injunctions in Oxnard. We thank all the peacemakers who are here, especially those who have struggled personally with gangs and gang violence and emerged to be the leaders we so badly need. Ron Noblette, Mike Garcia, Paul Carrillo, Danny Zamora, Claudia Baracho. We thank Connie Rice for her leadership, and of course, I would like to personally thank my colleagues at UPI, my mentor Carol Sobel, my wife Teresa. This work saves lives, and for that, we're grateful to all of you for your support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Laura Smolo, and on behalf of the entire Munger, Tolles, and Olson team, Jake, Encore, Maria, and Adele, who's not here, we are honored to receive this year's Equal Justice Award. Jay Kralkamp and I started working on gang injunction issues with Peter Biebering and others here at the ACLU almost 10 years ago, which is hard to believe. We were relatively new lawyers then, but I remember being powerfully struck by something when I first learned about these issues, then in the context of the Vasquez case in Orange County. It was obvious to me and to my team that what had happened to our clients and named plaintiffs in that initial case, what had happened to Manny Vasquez, to Miguel Lara, to Gabriel, and Randy Bastida, to our entire class, was fundamentally unfair and threatened the very framework of our system, because it can't be that the government can subject an individual to punishing criminal-like restrictions indefinitely on a whim simply because the official in charge has made a subjective determination that the individual is in a gang with no checks and balances, with no due process. So we joined the ACLU in that fight and prevailed in Orange County. And when the opportunity to seek the same justice on behalf of LA residents presented itself as well, there was no question that we would jump right in. There was no question we would fight for Peter Arellano and Joe Reza and the thousands of other Angelinos who cannot see family members or spend time in their own neighborhood for fear of arrest. But today, there's also something else. In a time when our most fundamental values, our very system of rules and process and fairness are under attack, it's more important than ever that we ensure that the decisions affecting our neighbors are made fairly and through a transparent and predictable process, and this is particularly true of the population affected by the Vasquez and YJC cases, which has been squarely targeted by some of the most egregious abuses of the current administration. Indeed, that commitment to due process and constitutional rights is the only way that we'll continue to recognize this country that we all hold so dear. It's been a privilege and a pleasure to do this righteous work with Sean and Josh at UPI and with Peter and Melanie and the entire ACLU team, including the amazing Aditi, who's been the inaugural MTO Fellow at ACLU SC, the funds for which came from a fee award that we received in the Vasquez case. These folks are brilliant, tireless, courageous, and collaborative advocates, as well as good friends, and we are all, and I mean our entire nation, so deeply fortunate that the ACLU is here to challenge injustice every day. We at MTO are fiercely proud to stand by their side. Thank you.
Introducing the Community Service Award, Sherry Leinwand.
The last award. Let me see a show of hands. How many people know what September 17 is? I don't see any. Do I see? A few hands. Thank you. September 17 is Constitution Day, the anniversary of the day in 1787 when delegates to the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia signed the Constitution. Congress declared it a federal holiday in 2004 and mandated that all publicly funded schools teach on that day about the history of the Constitution. Through our Constitution Day program, the ACLU sends out volunteer speakers to middle and high schools each year. For some students, too many actually, it's the first time they learn about the workings of their own government. For others, it is a confirmation of the benefits of a representative democracy. Constitution Day is dear to me and to our staff at the ACLU. And it is also dear to the legal department of Amazon Studios here in Los Angeles and the Amazon Corporate Legal Department in Seattle. Through their efforts, including those of our board member, Farhad Virani, the members of the Amazon legal departments were able to reach over 2,500 students, bringing the ideals and workings of American democracy to the next generation. We are so proud that Amazon's legal department joined our effort this year, sharing our goals of outreach, education, and inspiration. It is my honor to present them with the ACLU Community Service Award. Ajay Patel, please come and accept the award. Thank you.
Good afternoon. It's great to be last. I I first want to just say thank you again, and I'm accepting, even though I'm the only one here in front of the microphone, on behalf of the entire Amazon Legal Department, who we had a number of us get together to go out to these classrooms and to teach about the Constitution. And I kind of stare out, and I've never had these presidential types of speech things, although I have my speech on a napkin. But I feel a little bit of pressure right now. First, because now that I get to be the closer, you know, The Handmaid's Tale had that distinction, but now I feel pressure to like perform because there's just been so many impressive people who've done amazing things, who have inspired me just by sitting in that table and getting to hear their stories and what they've accomplished. So that's a lot of pressure. And then maybe even more important to me in terms of pressure, you know, Farhad Varani, who is a member of not only the ACLU board, but our Amazon legal department, kind of approached me as we were walking up, and he said, by the way, I told the ACLU guys you're going to be funny. And that's pressure. And so I have a hilarious topic to talk about, which really wasn't going to be hilarious until Farhad said I had to be, and it's about data. It's very Amazonian when we talk about data, and here are the numbers. All this done in one day. First, the number 13, that's the number of schools that we were able to visit both in Seattle and Los Angeles to teach about the Constitution. 37, that's the number of folks in our legal department that were able to go out and teach about the Constitution. And it started from the most junior person in the legal department to the general counsel of Amazon, a department of over 1,400 people. 66, that's the number of classrooms we visited. Picture small desks for young kids and grown-up folks having to sit at them sometimes. That's a lot of classrooms that we were able to visit. And as Sherry mentioned, we were able to hit 2,500 students in one day. And we're able to answer questions from kids about the Constitution and the rights they had. But the number that I was most kind of excited about sharing with you, and I hope is somewhat of an inspiration, is the number 11, and it serves for 2 data points. The first is the number of volunteers it took to actually put this together on the Amazon side. That's that number 11, and we are a good portion of that 11. And the second point that relates to the 11 is the number of days from when Colleen Hilton, standing here, got an email out to a small group and say, hey, what do you guys think about doing Constitution Day? From that point to the point we visited 2,500 students was 11 days. And so when you talk about not having a lot of folks to help you, and when you don't have a lot of time to do it, I hope we are a case study of what you can accomplish with just this small number of dedicated folks, a really big mission in mind, and a great kind of result to come out of it. And so we hope to do more with the ACLU on important projects like this, and thank you again, and I hope I was funny enough.
To conclude the program, Connie Cheng and Sherry Leinwand.
Okay, congratulations to all of today's honorees. The effort that began 95 years ago must continue. With your generous support, we can be certain that it will.
Please remember to leave your donation cards in the bowls, validate your parking, and sign up for Constitution Day. Thank you for coming today. We'll see you next year.